KP's Video News, y'all. And this is a double take, because for some odd reason, oh boy, I don't even want to get into it, but for some odd reason. Anyway, I'm doing this article here for one of my sons. You know, he was asking me questions about this situation that happened in the United States, and there was some things that, you know, just got brought to his attention pertaining to the Tulsa race riots, and also about, you know, things about Juneteenth and all that. And I guess somewhere down the line, man, I didn't get a chance to speak to them about this, and that's my bad. I dropped the ball on this, man. But anyway, I'm gonna do this article on Red Summer. And Red Summer, man, it was basically more than a summer, because this stuff, all this race riots and murdering and lynching and all this stuff that went on in 1919, they called it Red Summer, and it basically started in January of 1919 and went all the way to December of 1919. So let's see, it started in started in Bedford County, Tennessee, January 22nd, and it went all the way through December 27th in West Virginia. So, you know, you're talking about a whole year, man, a whole entire year of race riots and, you know, just bad things going on in this country. So Red Summer is a period from late winter through early autumn of 1919, during which white supremacist terrorism and racial riots took place in more than 36 cities across the United States, as well as one rural county in Arkansas. The term Red Summer was coined by civil rights activist and author James Weldon Johnson, who had been employed as a field secretary by the NAACP since 1916. In 1919, he organized peaceful protests against the racial violence which had occurred during that summer of 1919. In most instances, attacks consisted of white on black violence. However, numerous African Americans also fought back, notably in the city of Chicago and Washington, D.C. race riots, which resulted in 38 and 15 deaths, respectively, along with even more injuries and extensive property damage in Chicago. Still, the highest number of fatalities occurred in rural Elaine, Arkansas, where an estimated 100 to 240 black people and 5 whites were killed, an event known as Elaine Massacre. And this was before the Tulsa Massacre, Black Wall Street. And anti-black riots developed from a variety of post-war and social tensions, generally related to the demobilization of both black and white members of the United States Armed Forces following World War I. An economic slump and increased competition in the job and housing markets between ethnic European Americans, which would consist of Germans, Jews, Irish, and Italians, against black people in this country. The time would also be marked by labor unrest, for which certain industrialists used black people as strikebreakers, further inflaming the resentment of white workers. The riots and killings were extensively documented by the press, which, along with the federal government, feared socialist and communist influence of the black civil rights movement at the time following the 1917 Russian Bolshevik revolution in Russia. They also feared foreign anarchists who had bombed homes and businesses of prominent figures and prominent business owners and government figures. So you got the Great Migration, and while the mobilization of troops for World War I, and with the immigration of Europe cut off, the industrial cities of the American Northeast and Midwest experienced a severe labor shortage. As a result, northern manufacturers recruited throughout the South, from which an exodus of workers ensued. By 1919, an estimated 500,000 African Americans had immigrated from the South to the industrial cities of the Northeast and the Midwest in the first wave of the Great Migration, which continued until 1940. African American workers filled new positions in expanding industries such as the railroads, as well as many existing jobs formerly held by whites. In some cities, they were hired as strikebreakers, especially during the strikes in 1917. This increased resentment against blacks among many working class whites, immigrants, and first generation Americans. Racism and in the summer of 1917, violent racial riots against blacks due to labor tensions broke out in East St. Louis, Illinois, and Houston, Texas, following the war. Rapid demobilization of the military without a plan for observing veterans into the job market and a removal of price controls led to unemployment and inflation, and that increased competition for jobs. Jobs were very difficult for blacks to get in the South due to racism and segregation. And during the first Red Scare of 1919, following the 1917 Russian Revolution, sentiment in the United States quickly followed on the anti-German sentiment that came from the war years. Many politicians and government officials, together with much of the press and the public, feared an imminent attempt to overthrow the U.S. government to create a new regime modeled after that of the Soviets. Authorities viewed with alarm African Americans' advocacy for racial equality, labor rights, and the rights of victims of mobs to defend themselves. In a private conversation in March of 1919, Woodrow Wilson said that the American Negro returning from abroad would be the greatest medium in conveying Bolshevism to the United States. Other whites expressed a wide range of opinions. Some anticipated unsettled times, and others didn't see any signs of tension. So, they had one black veteran wrote a letter to the editor of the Chicago Daily News and saying that the returning black veterans are now new men, and they are now world men, and their possibilities for direction, guidance, honest use, and power are limitless. Limitless. So they were coming back strong. They had went to war. These black men from the South that went to war, they're coming back. They're strong. They've been trained. They know how to fight. They know how to defend themselves. And that's when you had some of your worst lynchings, and which just happened to be the majority of the people that were being lynched were soldiers, were veterans coming back from the war, and they were trying to lynch them before they got a chance to get back to the South and bring a new sense of pride and a new sense of strength to those timid blacks that were living in the South, that were walking on eggshells around white people. And white people feared that they would go back to the South and they would rise up against them. And so W.B. Du Bois published an essay, Returning Soldiers. We returned from the slavery of uniform, which was the world's madness demanded us to don the freedom of civil rights. We stand again to look America squarely in the face and call a spade a spade. We sing, this country of ours, despite all its better souls have done and dreamed, is yet a shameful land. We return from fighting, and we return fighting. So you had the early riots that went from April 13th to the July 14th in Jenkins County, Georgia, Charleston, South Carolina, Longview, Texas, and this one here, July 3rd, local police in Bisbee, Arizona, attacked the 10th U.S. Cavalry, an African-American unit known as Buffalo Soldiers. I'm going to say that again. On July 3rd, 1919, local police in Bisbee, Arizona attacked the 10th U.S. Cavalry, an African-American unit known as the Buffalo Soldiers. So you actually had cops attacking the military, white cops attacking the military. The reason, I don't have the reason for that. There's no explanation for that one. And Garfield Park, Indianapolis, where multiple people, including a 7-year-old girl, were wounded. Washington, D.C. Beginning Washington, D.C. on July 19th, saw 4 days of mob violence against black individuals and businesses perpetrated by white men, many of whom in the military and in uniforms of all three services, in response to the rumored arrest of a black man of the rape of a white woman. The men rioted, randomly beat black people on the street, and pulled others off streetcars. When police refused to intervene, the black population fought back, and the city closed saloons and theaters to discourage assemblies. Meanwhile, the 4 white-owned local papers, including the Washington Post, ginned up weeks of hysteria, fanning the violence with incendiary headlines, calling in at least one instance for the mobilization of a cleanup operation. After 4 days of police inaction, President Woodrow Wilson mobilized the National Guard to restore order. When the violence ended, a total of 15 people had died, 10 whites, and including 2 police officers and 5 black people. 50 people were seriously wounded, while another 100 severely wounded. It would be one of the few times in the 20th century, white-on-black riots, that white fatalities outnumbered that of black people. And the Chicago riots, let me go back. July 21st, Norfolk, Virginia. There was another riot there. The Chicago riots from July 27th to all the way through August 12th. And they beginning, the Chicago race riot marked the greatest massacre of Red Summer. Chicago beaches along Lake Michigan were segregated by custom when Eugene Williams, a black youth, swam into an area on the south side customarily used by whites. He was stoned and drowned. Chicago police refused to take action against the attackers, and thus young black men responded with violence, lasting for 13 days, with white mobs led by the Irish. White mobs destroyed hundreds of mostly black homes and businesses on the south side of Chicago, and the state of Illinois called in a militia force of 7 regiments, several thousand men to restore order. The resulting casualties of the riots included 38 fatalities, and 1,000 black families left homeless. So from mid to late August, you had other situations. They had a Knoxville riot in Tennessee, Omaha, Nebraska, September 28th through the 29th, and same situation, man. But the Elaine massacre, this was the worst one. The Elaine massacre of Elaine is Phillips County, being district for having occurred in a rural South rather than in a city. The event erupted from the resistance of the white minority against the organization. Listen to what I'm saying here. This event erupted from the resistance of the white minority against the organization of labor by black sharecroppers. So you had black sharecroppers that were trying to organize, and there was a resistance by the white minority. Along with the fear of socialism, planners opposed such efforts to organize, and thus tried to disrupt their meetings in the local chapter of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. In confrontation, a white man was fatally shot and another wounded. The planners formed a militia to arrest African American farmers, and hundreds of whites came to the region. They acted as a mob, attacking black people for 2 days at random. During the riot, the mob killed an estimated 100 to 237 black people, and Arkansas governor appointed a committee of 7 composed of prominent local white businessmen to investigate. The committee would conclude that the Sharecroppers Union was a socialist enterprise and established for the purpose of banding Negroes together for the killing of white people. The report generated such headlines as the following on the Dallas Morning News: Negroes seized in Arkansas riots confessed to widespread plot, and that was a lie. Planned massacre of whites today, that was a lie. Several agents of the Justice Department's investigation spent a week interviewing participants through speaking to, but they didn't speak to not one sharecropper. The Bureau also reviewed documents, filing a total of 9 reports stating that there was no evidence of a conspiracy of the sharecroppers to murder anyone. So they did get the truth eventually. But local government tried 79 black people who were all convicted by all white juries, and 12 were sentenced to death for murder. As Arkansas and other southern states had disenfranchised most black people at the turn of the 20th century, they could not vote, run for political office, or serve on juries. The remainder of the defendants were sentenced to prison terms of up to 21 years. Appeals of the convictions of 6 of the defendants went to the Supreme Court, which reversed the verdicts due to failure of the court to provide due process. This was precedent for a heightened federal oversight of defendants' rights in the conduct of criminal cases. So like I said before, all this stuff went on, man, from January 22nd, 1919 to December 27th, 1919. A whole entire year of nothing but total chaos that was spurned and brought about by whites in this country against blacks. And this is the type of stuff that the history that they are trying to erase, and they're trying to hide with the so-called critical race theory that they're trying to remove from the schools. But this stuff right here is not even being taught. This is not even being taught in school. This stuff is not being taught in school. You got to go and you got to find this information. It's out there. It's out there, man. It is out there. So, you know, hey, if anytime a group of people decide that they want to try to eliminate history, you better believe it's not for a good point. It's not for a good purpose. Because they're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to erase you from history. And if they succeed in erasing you from history, then they can possibly succeed in erasing you off the map completely. So be aware of all this madness that's going on and keep your eyes open. So this is just one story, folks. This is one story in the story of hundreds. Like I said, it's two factors you got to deal with here. You got the men, black men coming back from World War I after fighting in World War I that had left the South, that had seen the world, and they got treated with much more respect overseas than they did when they came back to the United States. They got treated like dirt all over again. Even after fighting for this country, they lost their lives. They were getting lynched, murdered, kidnapped. Turns out that Emmett Till's uncle was one of the guys that was returned from World War I that had got lynched. And years later, Emmett Till would get lynched down in the same parts of Mississippi. That's something, you know, that's real history, man. You can't make this up. Number 2, you had that mass migration from the South, people leaving the South going to the Midwest and to the North to trying to get jobs. They're trying to get jobs. And so just because they were trying to get work, you had the people of the whites in those areas, the poor whites now, that were working on some of those jobs, working in the slaughterhouses and doing all that, you know, work that they really didn't want to do in the first place, were upset because blacks were getting those jobs. You know, it's like, hey, it's enough. If the people can hire you, that means they can definitely pay you. So if they can pay you, then what's the problem? I mean, as long as everybody's getting paid, why should you even worry about or the color of the person that's working there. That's just another misnomer. That's just another lie and another reason that they use to disturb and disrupt and point the finger at the people that they don't particularly like, or they don't particularly understand, or that they have a fear of because they have abused them so long. For so long, they have that fear in the back of their mind that one of these days, these people are going to wake up and they're going to remember all this dirt we've done to them, and they're going to retaliate. And that's where your fear comes in. All right, folks, this is KP's video news history lesson.